Joining us now here in the studio is Dr. Vin Gupta, practicing pulmonologist and public health expert, also senior medical analyst for MS Now. It's great to have you in-house.
Yeah, thanks for having me in the house.
Okay, so AI is such a big deal in our life now. And so as we see kids using it more and more and more, what are the benefits, especially when they're that little?
You know, I think getting unstuck, and when used well, artificial intelligence can be a helpful tool, even at a young age. But I mean, we've had this conversation, Joyce. I think we're learning as we're growing. We're learning as these tools are now available to us. I know we're doing this same exact thing in medicine and in medical school. Every part of society is learning how to leverage these powerful tools. I'm glad at least UCDS and their graduate school are thinking about it. What are best practices in early childhood education? Because otherwise, what's going to happen? It's going to be a void and a gap that might go filled without any accountability.
And I love their approach that they look at AI as one of the many tools in your toolbox that you could use, but it doesn't really replace the critical thinking piece. So we know AI can enhance, as we just saw, the critical thinking piece of it, but does it risk replacing it at all in your mind? I know parents would worry about that.
I worry about the same thing, again, across society, but I love their approach. I mean, you know, what we saw there was a microcosm of what's happening across education, but human first, human last, various tools like in-person socialization, critical thinking, complex collaboration, but again, that socialization piece is critical. And then yes, of course, you have artificial intelligence tools available there to help get unstuck, potentially ask better questions, to advance your thinking. And so I think that's the approach here, is can it augment our approach? I think about the same thing in the four walls of a hospital, Joyce. Is it gonna, what happens if there's a grid failure? What's gonna happen with the next generation of physicians? Will we not know how to diagnose? Or are we gonna use these tools to help augment and reduce, say, misdiagnosis? And I think that's the goal.
That's a scary thought.
It is,
to think that if AI went down, that doctors may not be able to diagnose because they're so reliant on that. Something to think about.
Well, I think
that's a different story.
Skill attrition, right? I mean, beginning at a young age. But again, I think that's the reason why UCDS, they have a graduate school that is teaching teachers, frankly, early in their career, what's the best way to leverage these tools to make sure that they're augmenting their classrooms appropriately, not contributing to skill attrition.
From a health perspective, what are concerns if kids start to rely on it too much in their homework, in their daily work?
You were just saying this, you know, the last thing we want is more device time and more sort of pulls towards devices and blue light, which suppresses melatonin, which means sleepless nights. We don't want more devices in the bedroom, kids on devices, you know, before they go to sleep or constantly doing their homework. And so this is where parents have to set guardrails. I think same rules apply. I think parents need to get familiar too with how does an artificial intelligence tool help augment doing homework at night. I think we're learning that as a family. I think all families that we're surrounded with are learning the same thing. But of course, we don't want to increase device time because that's poor sleep. It actually might mean decreased socialization. We don't want that because we know that actually wrestling with a problem, asking tough questions, the struggle actually is really important to cognitive skill development, executive functioning.
So what about the worry that kids might become too dependent, students in general, all the way up through grad school, might become too dependent on the use of AI? Is that a valid concern?
Oh, I think that's a huge concern. And that's something that, if we're not having these conversations right now, if UCDS is not experimenting with it, much like other parts of society, we're not going to know what descaling looks like. And I think that's really what you're getting at here is, are we creating the next generation of individuals that are so reliant on artificial intelligence tools that there becomes this dependency? And again, I think that's where there has to be guardrails for use. That's why that human first, human last component is so critical.
It was interesting in some of the studies that Ben Chickadell did with his partner. The kids, fifth graders, were worried about perception of cheating, or if they weren't going to learn as much as they should in college, or would it impact their grades, et cetera. Are there mental health risks?
Well, again, I think if we drive, one of the most important things for developing young brains is socialization and interaction and curiosity. Last thing we want is in any way for these technologies to cause us to silo, to be more alone, to not interact, to not ask tough questions, and not to struggle. And so I think what Ben was pointing out makes a lot of sense. Frankly, I was encouraged, Joyce, that they have such awareness at the fifth grade level to be asking questions about whether or not they felt like they were cheating or taking a shortcut. That is such healthy awareness.
The warnings are sort of ingrained.
Absolutely.
If it feels bad, it probably is bad.
So, or at least
Right?
you need to have guardrails, absolutely.
What would be the advice you might have for families who want to strike a balance between this fantastic new technology that is here to stay and making sure that kids learn and use collaboration, critical thinking, adaptation?
Well, I think that the concern more broadly, it's not AI as being the health concern, it's balance being the health concern here. Are we striking the right balance? And so, as with everything in life, whether it's the food pyramid that you and I have talked about, whether it's the next thing, we need to strike a balance. I do worry that our society is talking about AI in every phase of life, all the time, 24/7. That we're going to lose a sense of moderation. I do love the fact that, again, schools that are modeling best practices help then parents understand what they should be doing and modeling at home. When it comes to, again, helping them think through essays or homework. And so it would be helpful to have a guide, and it would be also helpful to have a national conversation. I don't think we're having that. We're having community-based conversations. Luckily, we live in the city of Seattle, where these conversations are normed. But Joyce, let's be honest, we're not having this conversation at scale.
Right.
And that worries me, what's happening in other zip codes across the country.
And I also think just because we can have it in every aspect of life doesn't mean that we should.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you. We're going to have to leave it there. Will you please come back
Absolutely.
in studio?
Always.
It's always so great to have you, Dr. Vin Gupta.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Joyce.